right
This
to an
episode, we
opinion.
feature a channeler, an intuitive guide. She has made a living helping others raise their spiritual awareness and consciousness. Author of Awakening to Channel, I'd like to welcome Gayle Thomas to the show. How you doing, Gayle?
I'm great. Thanks, Dylan. Thanks for your interest.
Yeah, very interested in what you do. Little bit of a setback here with the technical thing. Hopefully, it'll kind of smooth itself out for us. Um, I
It happened.
guess, yeah, I guess you're where did you kind of first discover this channeling that you do?
Well, I've we've all heard of Abraham Hicks, right? I think by now everybody's heard of Abraham Hicks. I've only been channeling a couple of years, and I had heard of it before. I mean, growing up, I was aware of what a psychic person was, and a couple of times I went to the College of Psychic Studies, which is a main kind of center in London, to go and visit psychics. But I was more kind of interested in those people rather than thinking that it would ever happen to me. And I'd always been a spiritual person. I'd say I'd always been interested in all things spiritual. I think the first thing that really struck a chord with me was yoga, studying yoga and the philosophy of yoga. And I studied to become a yoga teacher, and looking at a lot of that literature, the Vedas and the Upanishads and all the philosophy that's in there. It was the first time ever something had really struck a chord with me as something that made sense, until I happened to stumble upon Abraham Hicks and the materials that they used to come out with. And I thought, my gosh, this just feels right and makes so much sense to me. And I used to listen to them a lot. I discovered them in about 2012, I think. I stumbled upon them in a bookshop. But again, I never really sought to try and cultivate skills like that for myself. Coming from a sort of yoga background and having taught meditation, I was like practically using meditation in my life. And after a cancer diagnosis, I had a choice whether to go down the kind of conventional healing route for cancer, which was, chemotherapy, operations to take out the tumor, and radiotherapy, or I could go down the rabbit hole, which is what I did do, and just really look into the meaning of what cancer meant for me. Why did I get it? What have I been doing, or how have I been living wrong to attract that kind of disease and, manifest that kind of illness in my body? And I knew that one way to go into my healing process was to internalize and to really go into a lot of meditation practice. So it was during this phase of my life that where I was meditating a lot. In fact, it was like I treated this as my healing journey. So I was very serious about it, in much the same way everybody would turn up at hospital to have their daily dose of radiotherapy. I looked at my routine for healing myself of cancer very seriously. So I put meditation right at the top of that. And my practice included a lot of prayer work and meditation, and positive affirmations and chanting, along with lots of other positive health behaviors, the kind of normal stuff, diet related stuff and exercise. And it's during that period of time, on one particular afternoon, I was very deep in meditation, what I now know to be a trance-like state. And I sort of, I wouldn't say I was a particularly religious person. I don't practice any particular religion. But on this occasion, I think it was a combination of being quite pressurized, a combination of intense fear of dying, because I have two children, so fear of dying, a feeling of kind of desperation, and also no expectation on anything working to do with my asking. I think there was kind of just a relaxed way about me in that period of meditation. I made a prayer and I said, Jesus, if you're there, can you heal me? And I hadn't said that on any other occasion in a meditation. And in that moment, I was sitting cross-legged on the floor and my hands were kind of resting in my lap. I felt my hand rise up, but sort of like my hand and arm became animated, and I felt it rise up, and it placed itself on my breast where I'd had the cancer. And even though the hand kind of rested on the outside of my body, I felt the warmth of the hand go inside my chest. And this warmth and this intense feeling of love came over me, and it just felt like Jesus. There was no other, not that I've ever had that experience before. It was just obvious what it was. And it was completely humbling, overwhelming and humbling. And I was aware, this must have lasted seconds. I was aware that in that moment, this was not going to last. And this is probably the most magical experience I was ever going to have in my life. And so I just savored every kind of nanosecond. Time sort of really kind of collapsed. Expanded. And the hand went down, and my husband had been meditating next to me, and he'd finished meditating, and he just kind of was quietly watching, and he looked at me as if, so what the hell just happened? I had tears coming down my cheeks because I just felt so humbled. And I felt silly saying it because words couldn't really quantify or, describe the feeling I felt. And I just kind of said, I felt Jesus come to me, and I felt like he just healed me. So after that experience, the next day, of course, I couldn't wait to sit down to meditate, and thought, I'm going to do exactly what I did in the day before. I'm going to follow the whole process. Whatever I did yesterday, I'm going to remember, and I'm going to repeat the steps. And then I'm going to ask for him. I'm going to see if I can call him in again. So the next day came around. I spent a good hour in meditation. Then right at the end, I made sure I did everything right. I said, Jesus, that was really special yesterday. Speaking to him as if he was a man. That was really special yesterday. I don't suppose, I was so grateful that you came. I don't suppose you would come again, but would you? I would be so grateful if you did. And of course, once isn't more than enough, and da-da-da. And I felt him come in again. But this time, he didn't come into my body. I felt him close. And then just shortly after he came, I felt something else come in. And then he went, and that something else stayed. My arm raised off my lap. It pulled behind me. I was sitting in a cross-legged position. It pulled behind me. My head started to go to one side. It started to go to the back. It started to move around. And I willingly let that come to an end. It was, again, too much for one day. And, I opened my eyes and thought, oh, right, okay. This is probably channeling. And next day, so, my husband then, we started this thing where he was kind of watching me. We would meditate together. He'd always finish before me. And, I was building on it day on day. And this eventually, it kind of morphed into more and more head movements, feeling of this entity kind of taking over my body. It was a feeling of bliss, by the way, ease and bliss. I was in a trance state. I was in trance. And what I noticed is that if I thought a thought, it sounded as though I was speaking in a tunnel and there was nothing else around, and I could hear answers back in that tunnel. It was a very clear kind of telepathic connection to what I didn't know, but it was like all of a sudden my thoughts that I was thinking, they were very loud, they were very echoey, they were very ominous. There was nothing else, no other interference there. And the answers coming back were too. And I realized that the answers were them speaking to me. I was starting to get kind of an idea that there were some unworded answers coming to me. And then I said, would you be able to nod my head for yes and no? So then my head started, going up for yes, and then down diagonally, like a diagonal thing. Instead of a no like this, it was down like this for a no. And then, days following, I said, can we start to say words, yes and no? And then can we say other words? And they started sort of making me go through the vowel sounds like A-E-I-O-U. But the way they were doing it is by sort of animating my head to move, and I would then just follow on with the sound. So it'd be like, yes and no, and A, E, I. It was like they were telling me to stop by kind of the way they jolted my head. So it's obviously quite entertaining for someone else to watch, but really quite amazing for me to just witness, because my body was totally relaxed and it definitely was not me moving. There would always be a sequence before they started to speak to me where they put my arms into a sequence of movement, and I'd hear clicks in my shoulders, and they'd turn my neck all the way around to this side, and I'd hear click, click, and then click, click on this side, and sometimes a jolt up. And it was always something slightly different, but there was a lot of kind of adjustments they were doing. And, I was kind of feeding back to myself, like, there's no way I'm doing this to myself. I wouldn't move my neck that sharply to the right, and I wouldn't make it click on purpose. I'm very careful with my neck after, you're doing lots of yoga practice. So it was, that was very apparent to me. So there was a lot of inner dialogue going on with me, like, oh, this is just you. Maybe you're schizophrenic. What is this? You're just making this up as you go along. Like, what is this? You've just, what is this? But then it'd be like, well, you're not moving your body. That's not you moving your body. And, so the trouble is, I'm a very spiritual person, but I'm constantly aware that there's a lot of bullshit out in this kind of world. There are a lot of people that I think are just, they're not guided well, or they're just making stuff up, or they're exaggerating. So I've always been a bit of a like, I'm not sure if they're for real or not. So I was kind of quite harsh on myself. I'd never had any schizophrenic tendencies or, anything like that. I'd never seen a ghost before in my life.
But you were skeptical of yourself.
Yeah.
Which
yeah,
I think, a sound-minded person would be after experiencing stuff like that.
Perhaps, yeah. So, eventually they developed into, the movements, the sounds, they developed into words. First of all, yes and no answers, and then sentences. But that happened over a very quick period of time. Within about 2 weeks, I was able to say sentences. And then, I started to open it out and invite friends onto Zoom calls for them to ask questions. So generally, I've tested it out with a few different kinds of things. Very early on, me and my husband were testing out, random number, or trying to do random number generation. It's not really random number generation. He was writing down a number and we were asking them, TARP, their name's TARP, by the way. We were asking them to guess. The first time that happened, there were about 3 or 4 numbers in a row that were correct. And then when I realized the significance of being able to guess the correct numbers, every single number after that was completely wrong. So we realized that we couldn't, play the lottery or, gamble with that kind of, start winning lots of money with it. We tried to get in touch with a couple of loved ones. I spoke with my brother briefly. It was way too emotional for me and I wasn't comfortable with it. And maybe because in real life, I'm not really comfortable with mediums anyway. And so I wasn't comfortable with that. And I spoke a little bit with my partner's father. But I felt it was out of my comfort zone, that. And I just said, I don't want to do this and get in touch with people on the other side, deceased individuals. I'm quite happy with TARP. So I managed to communicate once or twice with animals. And once I was sitting in a forest and I spoke with trees, but I don't feel that is a speciality of mine. I think what I get from TARP is the most tangible idea that it's not me speaking. Whereas when I feel I converse with trees, there's still that element in my mind, like, you could have said that. You could have made that answer up, so It really has just stayed with TARP. But, I'm very keen with all of this to show other people, or to try and teach other people how to do this, but very keen to show other people that there isn't a difference between people that channel and people that don't. I don't want it to be like a me and everyone else, and you have to come to me for the answers, because I figure that if it's happened to me and it was just the right kind of conditions, it's a latent ability in all of us. And we've just kind of unlearned these skills. We sort of unshamanized ourselves, maybe, because as primitive people on the planet, the practice of, for example, shamanism, people very at ease and fluid in moving in and out of altered states. That was kind of normal to most indigenous communities all over the planet, and was a practice for thousands and thousands of years. Now we've got various doctrines and systems and governments and grid-like things and practices and routines that have unschooled us from these, more native ideas. And I think too much emphasis is placed on, the left side of the brain and on the normal waking state of consciousness. And people tend to invalidate or suppress experiences that happen in other altered states, whether it be dreams, near-death experiences, shamanic journeying, psychedelic experiences, out-of-body experiences, the list goes on. So I'm quite keen to shed a light on the aspect of channeling where I'm not trying to say, I've got Jesus speaking through me, or, I've got a message for the planet. I mean, obviously TARP do have positive messages of guidance for people, but they're really here, they've said to me, to help activate and trigger other people to get in touch with their own extrasensory perception. And I realized that a way to do that with a bit more credibility nowadays is to try and understand the mechanics of how you might get from A to B, how you might get from here to there. I don't want to sell myself as a kind of psychic that you can go to for, what's going to happen in your love life, because it creates some separation, and there doesn't need to be separation on a phenomena that I think we all have. And I think our kids are going to have it more readily available to them than us even.
Okay. You covered a lot of ground there. I just want to bring it back. I want to bring it back a little bit. I got a few questions. I think maybe the audience may have some, some questions on some of the stuff you mentioned. So taking it back to when you had that experience with Jesus and you felt like that you were healed, moving forward medically, did you go get checked? Did you?
Yes.
You did.
And I mean, well, I think it's best to say that I didn't seek any normal conventional treatment for cancer. I had my lump removed, but after that, I did, a healthy diet. I was doing the meditation, and after that kind of awakening experience I felt very confident at what had happened there. It just changed my belief system. As like Bruce Lipton speaks about, the biology of belief. And I think that that's really what happened. My outlook changed. I was no longer in fear of death, and I was no longer in fear of that word cancer. It's not a scary word to me anymore. And even if I got it again, I think I would just go into the same process again. And I've got this kind of understanding of communication or a guide beyond the physical form now anyway. So the sting of death is even gone.
That's wonderful. Now, do you feel going through that experience that others can heal themselves and do things like that?
I think we all have it within us to heal ourselves. I think it's just a case of we are non-physical beings, and basically we're hyperspatial trans-dimensional beings. That's what I feel we are. And all we're doing is we're casting a shadow into a material world, and that shadow is our physical body. So it's kind of an after projection of what we are. And you can just kind of you can change that projection of what you are by working on the consciousness that is all pervasive and transdimensional. So I think absolutely. And, there are loads of really cool people out there at the moment that are, doing that kind of thing, just, that kind of teaching, trying to teach people, like Joe Dispenza, trying to teach people self-healing. And you got heart math, they're talking about heart coherence. And, there's so many kind of wonderful institutions and groups and cool individuals working along those same lines. And if I can do it in my own small way, then I feel quite good about that. Yeah.
That's wonderful, and it's nice to talk to somebody who's been able to do that, because I've read some of Joe Dispenza's work, Lipton's work. It's stuff that I'm interested in. So to actually have someone on my show that's actually been through it and kind of done some of those things is pretty good, pretty fascinating. So through this process, I'm assuming it kind of helped you to grow spiritually. Obviously, you're able to channel now, and you've kind of been doing it since.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I do it daily. I channeled this morning. I asked them a couple of questions about my dreams last night. My kids, I've got 2 teenage girls. They speak to TARP regularly. TARP have told my oldest daughter to collect the notes and turn it into a journal, the teenager's guide to having a mum as a channel. So she's asking all kinds of teenager related questions, and sometimes the odd really deep question comes in at the middle of nowhere, and she's kind of writing the answers on her laptop. So she's got this journal that she's keeping that someday she's going to turn into a book. Growing up
good.
your mum as a channel. But one of my daughters got ADHD, and as it's just an interesting aside, I think that so many kids have got these kind of psych ed reports, ADHD. I've heard Gabor Mate. Are you familiar with Gabor Mate? Yeah, I've heard him talk about people with ADHD. They learn to tap out of the current kind of situation, whether it's in a classroom or a chat with their parent, because they were tapping out of trauma or things they didn't like seeing. But I've also read in recent literature, in reading around consciousness and channeling, that those who have had channeling experiences or have seen UFOs or had contact encounters or abduction encounters, they have also they've got a high correlation statistically with the amount of trauma they received as kids. So the angle I'm getting at here is kids with ADHD, or people that say they're channeling or have had contact with ET or seen craft or UFOs or anything like that, they all seem to have this thing in common of have some kind of degree of exposure to trauma. But what that does in having exposure to trauma, when a person learns to cope with trauma, they're learning to tap out. They learn to kind of dissociate with what they find traumatic, and they learn to put themselves in their own kind of daydream / trance states, if you like. But that's really interesting, because it seems that channeling happens when we're in a so-called trance state, or you may have heard it called a flow state. It's like, so these kids that may not fit the mold for regular education right now, let's see how that plays out.
Right.
As we get more trans-dimensional, or our minds, we develop to have more non-local kind of minds. There's some interesting angles to all of this.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I do think the education model is a little messed up, in that, they try to maybe teach everybody the same direct way. And I think people learn in different ways, and everybody's a little bit different and unique in their own way. It doesn't make it good or bad. It's just they're unique and different. And maybe that, they pick up on things that others aren't, like you mentioned. So this consciousness thing, you said that you've talked to what you call spirit on the other side, or perhaps somebody who lived a life here on earth that you've known and then has passed over. You also mentioned that you've spoken with animals and trees, which I find absolutely fascinating, because shamanic journeys and people who have had psychedelic experiences sometimes have these experiences with like plants or trees.
Yeah.
What do you think that is? Is a tree simply just consciousness similar to us? What's going on that you're able to tap into these different like animals and plants and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, even though these were just one-off things, because I'm more comfortable with TARP, who by the way say they're Andromedan, by the way, an Andromedan energy, a collective Andromedan energy.
Okay,
But
so I wanted you to talk on that a little bit once
yeah,
the tarp thing. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I mean, essentially, we're all one. You know, this idea concept that we're all one, and we're just fractalized versions of God playing itself out, right? Many faces of God. But I do think that there is, just the way shamanism posits, actually, that there is a spirit to most things. Everything has a spirit, everything has a consciousness, a tree, a rock, you know, a piece of wood, a song, a book. And I think that a lot of these forms might just be sort of second density consciousness, or you know, we're third density consciousness. So and I think you can come across thought forms, kind of residues of people's thoughts when they were in the body, or you know, their energy. I found my communication quite simplistic when I have communicated with cats. I think that that could be developed. In fact, I did speak with an accomplished shaman this morning, and to talk about, you know, the protocols of learning that, because I figured that if I already have quite a good relationship with the spirit that I'm in touch with, that perhaps I could diversify and you know, get a range of guides in the way that shamanic healers do. They have a range of kind of power animals that they go to, a range of, you know, they have the ability to identify what somebody's problem is and then say, right, I need to go into the underworld and I need to find a leopard and I need to speak with the spirit of this. And then once they go in the underworld, they have these conversations without getting freaked out. They're able to bring back answers from these spirits in nature, right? These animals. And they're able to bring it back and anchor it down into normal waking consciousness to have a solution for their patient or the community or whatever. So I think that there are practices to learn that you can do that. And I think that, you know, just because I'm channeling one set thing, it doesn't mean that that's the be all and end all. It can be opened up. I mean, there's a massive, you know, we've got a field of consciousness around us, and in it is everything, including all other species.
Yeah.
And you
I
know,
mean, depending on how you look at it, I think, you know, you made a good point. You'd mentioned a book is perhaps even conscious in its own way, not maybe like me or you, but, and I suppose it is, if everything around us in the material world is just a reflection of consciousness, then I suppose everything is consciousness. I don't know. What is your thoughts on consciousness? Are we all one? And then we are these kind of separate lives living to experience differently. And for God, like are we
yeah,
godlike creatures? Is that your take on
absolutely.
things?
Yeah, that's the way I see it. That we are all we're all gods. So basically, right now we could even say this conversation is God having a conversation with itself, right? And to expand itself, right? The new experiences for the expansion of consciousness itself is kind of like a circular thing. But I think, yes, we are all one, and we are all in the time frame of now, which is something that TARP speak about. There is only one time frame, and I think we've heard that said by other people as well. But of course, where we are, we're living in kind of a time space, parameters of time and space. So it looks like everything's linear for us, and as a result, we have this linear thinking, which makes us feel like time is passing, and we have this, you know, this normal waking consciousness. But when you're outside of this kind of third density matrix or grid, you can see that everything's actually overlaid on top of one another, sort of a holographic kind of world, holographic kind of universe or universes. And you know, everything's overlaid on top of each other, and everything's right here, right now. But we, manifested as human beings, only have the ability to perceive a small kind of wavelength of matter, right? Be able to read a certain kind of spectrum of light and sound. But I think we are all different points of focus of the same energy, basically. So we're all experiencing what it's like to be, you know, in the costume of Gayle for a while, in the costume of Dylan, in the costume of Hitler, in the costume of Mother Teresa, in the costume of a leopard, in the costume of a rock. And I think that there is an upward motive of this, like an ascension motivation for all of this, for just expansion, the expansion of consciousness for its own sake, you know, for its experience itself.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I get that, and that makes sense to me. Now, do you believe that, like, as Gayle, you've had other past lives that are perhaps separate from the rest of consciousness, and there's this kind of like whirlpool of things that, you know, you're, I don't know, lack of a better word, higher self or soul has experienced, and are we different in that aspect, or do, like, when we go back, we come back and we reincarnate, we're just coming from directly from source again?
I think we have we're so I believe that I've had past lives, but actually they're all in the now. They seem like they're past because all I can feel as I'm me right now is me here right now, right? And I have actually experienced little glimmers of that in dreams, or sometimes staring in the mirror. I've caught glimpses of other faces and things. I think that we have oversouls. So we have our higher self, we have our, you know, our soul with its kind of character and its kind of mission of what it wants to experience in the body of Dylan or in the body of Gayle for this kind of lifetime. But it belongs to a kind of soul family that have multiple projections at any one time, and it may not all be on Earth. It may be in other kind of densities, other planets or constellations. And there is an upward purpose to that. There is an ascension, there's an evolution always happening. And above all of that is a godlike energy that's all pervasive. There are different sects and subsects, you know, with different roles to play, I would say, in evolution, different kinds of ways of regulating what happens with the evolution. So I basically think it's all one. Yeah.
That's a good answer. Can you tell the audience what TARP is? You've mentioned it quite a few times. Break it down for us. Give us an idea of what it is, what you're talking about.
So the best way to describe them is a collective consciousness that are of Andromedan descent. They're unindividuated, so they don't have a sex. There's no male or female. They come to me saying that they don't have physical bodies, and they come as a group, but there is not one person over anyone else speaking. They're answering collectively. And I have connections with them. I have Andromedan connections with them. And I'm having a human experience. I've had an Andromedan experience. They're slightly more further down the line of evolution, I would say, than this physical human version of me, insofar as they're already able to transcend their physicality and their needs for, you know, binary opposites, you know, pairs of opposites like what we have on Earth, you know, light, dark, heavy, light, male, female. They've sort of evolved out of ego consciousness. So the singular I, where, you know, we as earthlings, human beings, we operate from our egos and we see ourselves as individual, So I see myself as individual to you. They don't have that anymore. They don't have that sense. They have a group mind, a group consciousness.
What does it seems to be an interest in you though, right? Or something.
Yes, yeah. I think that well, they say they're interested in me. It's not really an interest, it's just a relationship. It's energetic connection. I have Andromedan connections, which probably means I might be part of them right now. And here I am at the same time as a human form. But the thing with being in a human form is some people like me, they had to wait till they get to 48 years of age before they realize they can channel. So I think the drawback with being human is you don't always kind of wake up or come out of your mum's womb awakened, like a baby Buddha, like knowing sometimes you just have to go for a bit of shit and then something opens up and you're able to perceive a new kind of consciousness, a new kind of connection. And that's what's happened with me. They say they have connections with my children. They say they're here to help, especially at this time, as in this time of transition, this time of great change, this time especially to help those younger people, such as my daughter, those that are sensitive, younger, that are just waiting for some kind of activation or triggering themselves. They don't make any grand claims, I would say, because they express to me that they are a connection for me. And that, I mean, I didn't need this really said to me because I can see lots of many other people are having their own connections with their own guides. I mean, it's kind of happening a lot. I think lots of people are suddenly realizing they're channeling or are getting, having lucid dreams or some kind of communications going on, not just through channeling. But they're quite personal to me, but they are definitely here for guidance, and they do answer, questions about what's going on the planet and life and, day-to-day trials and tribulations. So, yeah. And I'm aware that I'm somewhat of a baby in all this because I haven't been doing it for years and years. I'm aware that it happened to me and it came on quite quickly. But I've often said, I want to be channeling like scientific stuff like quantum physics, and can you give me chemical formulas and equations? That's what I really want. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because then I can prove to everyone that it's not just me making it up. And they're like, but okay, Gayle, if you want to talk like that, you better study all of that, because remember, we use you as a voice box and a word processor, so you kind of need to become au fait with these subject matters and topics, then we can do that. But in the meantime, remember, we're using your lexicon of language and vocabulary, and it's something that somewhat that will grow with each other as time passes. But yeah, they can be funny. They can be funny sometimes.
That is really interesting. I've asked other guests on this show to tell me about this, and you had mentioned a few times about meditation, especially when you were going through trying to get over cancer, trying to fight the cancer. Can you maybe tell the audience the importance of meditation, or perhaps what it does to somebody spiritually, or I don't know, just
yeah, happily. So first I would say is don't get tied up on the word meditation, because some people can't meditate. For example, lots of people I know with ADHD, they can't meditate, right? They can't sit down and read a book. They can't have that one pointed focus of mind. So if that is the case for you, just scrap that word and just be lost, be immersed in something where you're in that kind of flow state, because you may find yourself, whether you're conscious of it or not, going in and out of a trance state. So it could be painting, it could be just like listening to music, whatever, really gets you into that place that you're feeling passionate about. And that is the stuff that you need more of, because that is your connection to your higher self. And my higher self, incidentally, is the conduit between me and TARP, right? I can come back to that later, but you want to be in contact and as blended with your higher non-physical self as often as possible. And you can get there by being consumed in something you love. It might just be, watching a sunset, or, that time out for yourself where you can actually go beyond that chattering monkey mind that we have. If you do like meditation, you could, and you want to start, I would start with the basics. Go with guided meditations where someone else is leading it. Wim Hof, oh my goodness, Wim Hof, such a great guy and such a great practice. He's doing the modern day kind of, if pranayama could be made modern day for modern day society, he's definitely doing it warrior style. And that is a great technique to totally clear the mind of any thoughts and bring you definitely into a trance-like place if you don't like meditation. Of course, pranayama works. And there are lots of meditative practices, but what meditation does is it unplugs your five senses. It unplugs your eyes, eventually when you've got to a still place and you're able to stand back from the thinking mind, which is of course not you, and you're able to witness yourself. You're able to witness your mind when a thought comes in, when you've got an itch on your arm, you're able to witness. Your consciousness becomes slightly outside, I would say, of your body, right? Now, that is quite a big step when you think about most of us. Our consciousness is not even in the whole of our body. We normally just live in our heads and we dissociate from the rest of our bodies. But being in a meditative state allows you to kind of even come out of your mind. So in fact, it could almost bring you into like what some might call your second body, just slightly outside. And if you can start to do that, you're kind of merging with that field that Joe Dispenza talks about, right? The consciousness field, the field of consciousness around you. And, of course, there are lots of practices that can make you go much further out of your body, which I don't recommend for beginners. And there's all kind of guidance on that. But what meditation does is it gives you a break from the chattering mind and the programs and the patternings that you've had running all your life. And they might be programs running which are like saying to you, I'm not good enough, I'm not enough, I'll never succeed, I'm sick. You may have had stuff said to you, in your childhood, your subconscious things that you picked up at school, or your programming from media, whatever, all the crap that we pick up from these systems on our planet. But meditation allows you to become sovereign. It allows your knowledge to become decentralized. So we talk about decentralization of money, right? We talk about cryptocurrency and things like that, but there's decentralization of knowledge. True power is when you are able to acquire your own knowledge from your own source. So, intuition from your higher self, all these things can be gained through meditation, this kind of sovereign power where you can rely on what feels right to you, what feels like the truth to you. You can feel intuition, you can glean intuition from your own higher self when you've got your chattering mind out of the way, when you've just stepped out of the way. So any method that gets you to step out of the way, think of your mind as a kind of toddler, and you need to give your toddler mind something to play with, like you'd give a toddler some, Lego, or say, here's a Tonka toy, go off and play with that. That's kind of what you need to do with your mind. And that's what meditation is. You're giving your mind a break. So the ways in with meditation quite often, allow you to distract your mind. There might be with guided meditation, listening to someone give instructions, or meditative music, or it might be pranayama. The whole process of doing yoga was in order to do something to distract your mind so you could get into a meditative state afterwards. But it's all about giving your mind something to distract itself. Wim Hof's great for that. Wim Hof breathing. Apart from Wim Hof breathing does actually change your biochemistry, which changes brain states as well. But that's why meditation is great, because it allows you to reclaim more of your own power, which is very important, I'd say, in this changing era that we're in.
Absolutely.
Right? Era of disinformation.
Absolutely. You offer a 5-week online course, don't you? Can you tell the audience about that? What is that?
Yeah, so it's Awakening to Channeling awakening to channeling and the kind of ideas of what ascension might look like for us right here and now, a feasible ascension for us. So it's kind of quite a basic course. It's an online course, and I also teach it privately, teaching people some practices that go slightly beyond meditation. So meditation practices, basically, first and foremost, and then practices to let you feel the energy of your body, to allow you to feel your aura, and then to regulate your aura, to feel how big or small it is, if it needs repair, to regulate the size and consistency of it. And then I teach you various grounding practices and protective practices. And then I teach a series of techniques that raise your vibration, raise the frequency of your aura, so that when you raise the frequency of your vibration, you are able to perceive a higher frequency in the fields of consciousness around you. So in other words, get you to a place where you are better prepared to channel yourself, to pick up on your own higher guides. So I'm always encouraging people, if you're looking to channel and you want to get in touch with your own guides, you're looking for guides that know more than you, that are more spiritually evolved than you. You don't want anything less. They're just going to be a pain in the butt. So the whole reason we go through this series of protection and grounding, and the grounding is so people don't just fly off and get lost in the ether. And the techniques for raising the frequency, they're really amazing practices. They're incredible. You really feel your frequency raise. You feel like a kind of buzzing, a humming going on.
That is interesting.
A number of my students have learnt to, well, they're learning to channel. They've had glimpses of their guides. Some are having interactions more and more in normal everyday life. One particular student of mine is actually seeing, he particularly wants to meet ETs. And so he's seeing more and more in the sky at night, them flying over in orbs and things. Other people have had different intentions. Some have been going down into the earth and meeting their guides and doing things there. But it's quite interesting where everybody takes this. So
it's interesting you had mentioned, not to get too far off topic, because there's another question I want to ask you, but you had mentioned that somebody wants to experience with ETs, and that he's seeing them more and more. There seems to be a connection with consciousness with that, right? With ETs and experiences and things like that. It's fascinating to me.
Isn't it? Yeah, totally.
So what is it about you? Why do you want to help? Why do you feel the need or the urge or the want to help people to channel and to be grounded and to maybe spiritually evolve? What is it? Yeah. What is it about it? What is it inside you that makes you want to do this?
So the reason why it would help, first of all, is if more and more people, I'm not trying to teach people to channel so they can have audiences and be famous. I'm not trying to teach people to be like Abraham Hicks, because number one, I'm not an Abraham Hicks. I'm just a normal everyday person that is a little bit cynical, but interested in consciousness and spirituality, right? And there are loads of people like me. And I want people to do the same so they become more free from their own sickness, illness. They can heal themselves. They can understand their own truth, information versus disinformation. They can reclaim their power. They can learn a different language, which is the language beyond the body, which is a universal language. And that is a language which is the language of energy, right? And once you've got that, we're talking about more and more people that are becoming more comfortable and familiar with this kind of energy language and able to converse, even having conversations like this, the more the mass consciousness tilts on this planet. And I think when that happens, when it actually takes hold in what you call mass consciousness, we'll see a rapid metamorphosis of our evolution as a species.
I'm hoping, do you think the disinformation and the lies and everything, once the planet maybe perhaps becomes the majority of it's awaken, or I don't really have the word for it, they've changed their mindset, do you think that some of that's going to go away and it's going to be kind of a different place for humans to exist?
So exciting. I think it's happening. It's happening now. I think there is momentum, systems and concepts that we used to hold in the highest repute are now crumbling, disintegrating. We're seeing that they're just bullshit, right? A lot of that is happening left, right, and center. People are thinking it. We're not all necessarily joining the dots and connecting with each other, but you see it, and you also see the backlash. You see how events have unfolded over the last 2-3 years, and they're going to continue to play out, and it will probably get worse. And then the worse it gets, the more it plays into the hands of a positive evolution for the species, because there's just so many of us now. The kind of realizing that we're starting to know much more. And that's a good thing for a human being, because we're curious, our species, right? And when we know we're knowing more and we're finding out more, we become addicted to, we're not going to put it down. We, like got a bit in our teeth, we're not going to let it go. And increasing consciousness, expanding consciousness is not a bad thing. We'll have, I'd imagine we'll have more interspecies communication, which means first and foremost on our own planet we'll see less of the differences amongst ourselves as human beings, amongst color, creed, etc. We'll be able to have a better symbiotic relationship with the planet. They'll drastically help matters on the planet with our animal kingdom, and then we can start to get really exciting and talk about extraterrestrial communication and intergalactic stuff like that. And once we can exchange communication and knowledge like that, then we have energy that doesn't cost anything. This 0 point energy you may have heard spoken about by Dr. Stephen Greer. We can then radically change the way things are done on this planet, right?
That's interesting.
And yeah, I mean, energy is a big thing right now.
Yeah. I think even Tesla was working on something like that, I believe. At least that's the rumor. And
yeah, these beautiful individuals.
yeah, that's fascinating. And I hope you're right. I mean, I hope that it does kind of, and perhaps that's, one reason why humans are here is to evolve into this, better species that, protects its planet and protects, that loves each other, better than we currently do. And I don't know, kind of sees people as more of one and the same rather than separating everything. Can you touch a little bit on your book? I guess it's not out yet, but you're currently working on a book, right?
Yeah. So the book is basically everything I teach and more. So it has everything I teach in the Awakening to Channel book. So it's easy to read, practical guide without too much jargon in it. Just very user friendly, with practices that are grounded. Very important practices just to keep people feeling safe, but to get them used to feeling beyond the five senses, to get them used to feeling energy, to get them used to tapping into the energy outside their body, being used to the energy of their aura, even raising the vibration of their aura. I mean, this is, when I say it like this, it sounds like it should be pretty elementary stuff. And I'm sure we did used to know all this stuff. But this is just trying to get these practices to just, it'd be lovely if they could be like normal things, like how we all know how to brush our hair and brush our teeth. We all know how to raise the frequency of our aura, to ground ourselves, to expand our aura, to contract it, to bring it in, to repair holes in it, to take our aura and visit someplace else, or, eventually we'd learn to telecommunicate. But the book is not going so far as to get you to, project yourself out of your body, or it's quite a kind of beginner's guide. It's very tangible, very practical, step-by-step awakening to channel. So not an overwhelming way in any way. I just really want to teach the mechanics of it and make it a concept that is much more amenable to everybody, rather than, oh, it's just you were born like this, or because I don't think I was any more than anyone else.
It sounds like it would be really a helpful book to read. I'm fascinated by it. I'm actually going to pick up a copy when it releases. Wait, do you have a publishing date or anything like that?
You know what? It was supposed to come out in August, but that got interrupted because I'm writing a thesis actually on consciousness, and so I'll come back to that. I'm thinking it'll probably come out December time this year, the book Awakening to Channel. I just got a little bit sidetracked because I'm writing a paper at the moment about the compartmentalization of consciousness. The way that human beings tend to compartmentalize their consciousness in such a way that it does suppress and invalidate any kind of extraordinary phenomena that we come across. So quite often people who have UFO sightings or alien contacts or abductions, they tend to forget that that's happened, and it gets uncovered in sort of hypnotic regression therapy, trance therapy later on. Or dreamlike states, people often forget what happens in their dreams. People tend to forget, or they discredit, oh, that couldn't have been real, or what I saw out there, that couldn't have been real. Why does that happen? And I'm writing a paper on why I think that happens at the moment, and if we can learn to integrate all those states of consciousness, how we can rapidly evolve ourselves as a human species, and we could know really what it means to be human, understand our full capabilities of what it is to be human, know our full potential. And
That sounds like a fascinating thesis.
yeah, kind of inspired by Tarp, who said,
Uh-huh.
you need to teach people how to join the dots, teach them how to join the dots between their altered states, dream state, unconscious, subconscious, normal waking state. Because going back to what we're speaking about right at the beginning in shamanism, that is a lost art of our people, of our species. Shamanism was practiced far and wide, from South America, North America, China, the Aborigines in Australia, Russia, Siberia, Celtic shamanism. Shamanism existed all over the world for thousands of years. And the point about shamanism, these people were able to, they asked permission, but they were able to fluidly move between their states, bring back information and anchor it down in their normal waking state. There was no taboo or discrediting of that. That was valid information.
Where
And
did
that's
where do you think it went wrong? Do you think it was perhaps the church and science materialism that kind of pushed
yeah,
it out, or some, because
yes,
if I feel like something had to have happened to
yeah.
kind of change the world's views on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, interesting you asked that question. I mean, I would say, as Gayle, yeah, the advent of the world's major religions, governments, systems, consumerism, other agendas came into play, other agendas, whatever label you might want to call that. TARP have often alluded to agendas at play, hybridization happening, slight altering of our genes, and various races coming in with their own agenda over the history of our species. We're talking about thousands and thousands of years ago, beyond what they would call recorded history. And things that have kept us in a kind of servitude, a kind of dulled down, switched off kind of power, if you like.
Yeah,
Yeah, religions have, you could say, they may have done that, right? Because they may serve the purpose that seemed more evident at the time.
and
But
I often wonder why that is. Why did that take place? Other than, is it just consciousness needing to have that experience of kind of being dumbed down and then trying to rise back up? I don't know. It's just it's
yeah,
odd. It's just odd.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, very interesting. That's very interesting because, um, well, there is the story of, so Timothy Wiley. Are you familiar with that channel? He's now passed over, but he wrote
No.
several books called about the Lucifer rebellion. He used to channel an angel, and his perspective on it is that there was a quarantining of Earth and 39 other planets in this part of the galaxy, that meant that they couldn't have any outside contact and not having the outside contact meant that the evolution of our species on this planet was extraordinarily slow, like painfully slow. I won't go into the full story of that because it takes quite a long time to explain, but there is kind of that. And then if you look at that story, why was it held back so much? There's a story about why it was quarantined, because it's about a Lucifer rebellion. There were some guardian angels said to be put in charge of this planet, and they decided to try and hurry things along themselves. And Lucifer came down with his group of angels, and they rebelled against the status quo. They were kind of guardian beings, and they started just kind of manipulating thought and started implanting ideas of beliefs and things like this, spiritual beliefs and religious ideas. And they ended up setting this planet back by, a very long way, and keeping us quarantined from having contact with other communities in the universe. If you look at that story, there's that. Why would that happen? Was that so the beings on this planet could have such a joyous divine waking up at the end of it? I don't know. I mean, that's kind of one story. I've also heard from TARP. I mean, there are lots of channeled teachings and perspectives on what happened to humanity and why is this, various extraterrestrial species came in and changed DNA, and
Yeah, I've heard that too about
the
DNA thing.
Yeah, to the greys. But ultimately, if you want to take the widest picture of it that I can possibly think of, like you just mentioned, it probably is to be an overall grand experiment and experience, right, of God and consciousness, because this awakening from the depths of darkness, from where we've been in the Middle Ages, and all kinds of suffering. I mean, in a sense, we have terrible suffering to this day, just the same as the Middle Ages, even though the form has changed. We may not have the plague, but we have our own stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I've always said that, you mentioned Luciferian. I always felt like there has to be evil, and there has to be suffering, and there has to be pain, because without those things, we don't understand the light, the good, the beautiful things. I think you need to have both, so you have an understanding of what it is you're truly experiencing or going through.
I agree, Dylan. It's really interesting that you said that. Of course, you need to know one to know the other, and as it's often described, planet Earth is a planet of opposites. It's a planet of pairs of opposites. So you have to have this contrast, and the contrast is what you bang against in order to spring off to find new things. It's almost like you don't get change without friction, right? It's like you get the friction on planet Earth, you get the friction by this experience, and this is a grand platform to experience everything on. And you hear lots of energy, spirit chooses to be incarnated here to have the chance to come back to this, to experience the friction, to go into the darkness, to forget who they are, right? To become dumbed down and think they're an individual ego in a body, to try and go for the jackpot and find the awakening in their life, even though they may go through several lives of like missing it completely. But yes, there's that, right? I think overall, there's an upward trajectory in all of this. There's an ascension process happening. And I saw something very interesting on a very old Joe Rogan episode where he showed the picture of the monkey, the orangutan, standing, leaning off a tree with a spear in his hand. It was an orangutan they've learned how to hunt. They've learned with tools how to fish, like spearing fish.
Wow.
And it was said, whichever expert was on the Joe Rogan show, that said that the monkeys are now moving into the Stone Age. And that hit me. And Tarp said, well, what do you think? You think it's just you humans that go through this upward things? They're the next humans. They're the next humans, right?
That's fascinating.
You're all moving up. You're going to lose your body at some point. You're going to move beyond your senses at some point. Everybody's on the way up. So I know there are some people that get worried about AI and they get worried about Elon Musk, for example, and uh, what will the changes bring? Having this, what's it called, Neuralink? What's it
Yeah, the
called?
Neuralink. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I just think this is evolution, and it can be taken either way. It just depends on the consciousness of the individuals once they've got this in them, right?
yeah,
It's like the internet. When people, what were people saying? I don't remember when the internet came out. Oh my God, like the stuff you can do, it's just going to be like
that's
drugs
right.
and
Yeah,
viruses and porn. But it's like, well, no, there's a lot of great stuff as well.
that's
Depends in
true.
whose hands it's in.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point.
trajectory, no matter what happened in our past, so-called past, in a sense.
And I think no matter what, um, no matter how we look at it, it's all a big magical place, ain't it? It's kind of fun when you really
Yeah.
stop and think about it. Uh, so is your book going to be available on Amazon? Like, where can we get your book when it
Yes.
does
Yeah. It'll
release?
be on Amazon. It'll be available on my website. Yeah. It'll be an Amazon book. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen, it's been a great discussion. I don't want to keep you much longer.
Yeah.
Where can listeners check you out, find your work, everything you're doing?
The best place to go is my website. So it's gayle-thomas.com. So it's Gayle with a Y, Gayle dash or hyphen Thomas, same Thomas as you, THOMAS.com. That's it.
Hey,
Yeah.
thanks for taking the time to do this
It's
today.
been great talking to you. Thanks so much.
Well, that's it for today's episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed another episode of In Search of Reality. If you enjoyed today's episode, please remember to share the show. Keep helping the show to grow. Thank you for all your support. Remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Take care, guys. Thanks for listening. And remember, question everything, find your own truths.